Alright folks, welcome back to Talkin Soccer. I am Justin Horniker. I want to dive right into tonight's Friday night NWSL matches because we have officially a new crisis club. Now, Kansas City Current, I would say we're already kind of in a crisis, but last week, well not last week, but the last time we saw the NWSL before the international break, Kansas City Current had beaten Gotham FC 2-1. And that seemed like, the Current didn't look great in that matchup. Neither have Gotham to this point, but if both those teams are struggling NWSL contenders, a 2-1 win over Gotham should have been a good indicator that the Current were maybe starting to get on the right track, especially with Temwa Chawinga returning into the lineup. Now, Temwa Chawinga starting in tonight's matchup against the Washington Spirit. Kansas City Current lose 4-0 in it is maybe more lopsided than the scoreline would betray, but still a very lopsided match where the Current have their best chance of the match when it's tied 0-0. Croy Bethune is in on goal against McIver, and McIver stays there. She stays tall, and Croy Bethune could probably do better in this moment, but it's a good save. It's a good opportunity to really cut down what Bethune is trying to do, and that is the Current's biggest chance of the night. This game ends 4-0, and while the Current had some chances, they had 1.36 expected goals here. Now, on target, that maybe tells the story that they had 0.6 on target. So they created chances, but they're not getting the finishing against a Washington Spirit who still created more than the Current did. Some of that is game state with the Current chasing. The Spirit were able to open things up a little bit more, but they were more clinical in these chances. So if you're looking at what is going on with the Kansas City Current in general, and what is making them different than the other NWSL contenders that have also been a little bit in crisis. If you look at the Washington Spirit, now they've kind of struggled, but they finally get in the win column last week against Bay, or earlier this month against Bay, and then in this match going up 4-0, they've been unbeaten since that little shock loss to Portland in the opener. They figured out how to score, and they figured out how to get these beautiful team movements to translate into goals. And if you look at Orlando Pride, Orlando lose to Racing Louisville today, but that scoreline 3-2 kind of betrays that the Pride have been, if you look at the expected goal differential in most of these matches that they've lost or that they've drawn, they've been the better team. They just, like last season, aren't getting the finishing that they need to make these not dominant, but these performances where they control the match turn into 3 points. And I think if you look at long term, I'm less concerned about that, especially a team with Barbara Banda, than I am against a team like the Current and a team like Gotham. Gotham have only scored 2 goals through this point in the season. And while the Current, because of this total dismantling at the hands of the Spirit, are the Current crisis club, Gotham are right there too. But let's focus in, because Gotham play later this weekend. They play tomorrow as I'm recording this. So let's focus in on the Kansas City Current and what has happened that they lost to the Spirit tonight in such a dominant fashion, but also why they are 0-4 on the road so far. They have allowed 11 goals against. They have 1 goal for in that Chicago match, the first away match of the season. I think a couple of reasons. A couple of things are going on here. One, last season they had elite goal scoring numbers and elite shot stopping. And under Vlatko Andonovski, if you look at this formation, while things haven't necessarily changed that much under Chris Armas, similar formation, similar philosophy, the spacing of what the Current have come into every match of this season is so much different than what you saw last year under Andonovski, where even though it's in that 4-2-3-1 and even in 4-2-4 when they're attacking, the spacing was so much more compact so that there was just no way to pass through the midfield of the Kansas City Current last year. You had to try to go over the top or try to really do whatever you could to get them out of position, but they're so well drilled, so well managed that this Kansas City Current team was not moving out of position. That's where we saw a team that was scoring and outscoring their opponents by over an expected goal per match last season. Definitely an elite season. Definitely a season where they outscored their production, where they got better goalkeeping numbers than what they're allowing. But even if you take the Kansas City Current at face value last season of they score what they're expected to score, not over, they allow what they're expected to allow and not under, they were still the best team in the league by far. That's how much better than the rest of the league they were last season. Coming into this season, coming into this match, they are now very, very pedestrian in their numbers. Goal differential of -8 after this match. That is the worst goal differential for the Current since their inaugural season under Hugh Williams, and that was pretty much a disaster, especially the opening half of that season. The Current are now 10th in goals added differential according to American Soccer Analysis database. They are 12th in expected goal differential. This is a team that has been unlucky. Obviously, -1.5 expected goal differential compared to -8. But that maybe gets you one more point. If you looked at their expected points table, they're expected to have 7 points. They have 6. That is the Chicago match where they actually were the better team on the expected goals differential. Now, a lot of that is game state where the Stars scored and then really just allowed KC to come at them once they got that second goal, because at that point it was just trying to bunker in and really protect the lead. But it tells a story of a team that, while they are maybe getting some unlucky bounces, and when Chris Armas sits here in his post-match speech and says that he feels like the Current are on the right track, that they're just getting on the wrong side of these bounces, that if you look at that first goal, if you look at Washington's first goal, that goals change games, and if they get that first goal from Croy Bethune, that they would be able to be in this game and potentially get a result from it. But if you look at the expected stats, that doesn't really tell the story. And the Current haven't had the most difficult schedule yet. Win at home against a Utah that were missing a lot of production to the Asian Cup. Win at home against a Gotham team that scored 1 goal heading into that match. And then lose on the road to Chicago, on the road to Spokane, on the road to the Reign in Spokane, on the road to Portland, and now on the road to the Spirit, where they've scored 1 goal through those 4 matches against Chicago. This is a team that's just not playing well. Not playing well with largely the same players that they had last season. Now they are missing a lot, of course. Claire Hutton leaves for the start of the season. They bring in Croy Bethune to replace some of that production, but Croy Bethune as a 10 versus Claire Hutton as what will probably go down as the best central midfielder, defensive central midfielder, possessions-oriented generation for $1.1 million. You bring in Croy Bethune for $1 million. That in itself seems a little bit unbalanced. And then you look at this squad that doesn't really have a defensive mid to replace Claire Hutton. And your defensive mid is Bailey Feist, who then gets injured and is not up to full strength. And then you're relying on Rocky Rodriguez, who's not really a central defensive mid and probably shouldn't be relied on to be your most important defensive central mid at this point in her career. It's just a roster that is now all of a sudden not constructed in the way that gives you the balance that the Current have had over the last couple of years. You look at Lorena, who has had some moments in the past couple of games. In this game especially, of course, she bobbles the ball that falls to Trinity Rodman for her goal, the first goal of the season. She's had some bobbles this year that have been not great, some goals that she should have saved. Compared to last year, where she had the second best shot-stopping numbers in the league, if not for Claudia Dickey, completely saving Seattle's playoff chances. Lorena was a very good goalkeeper, obviously rewarded with the Goalkeeper of the Year award. And this year, she has not been that. Something is just not right in the mix. Defensively, the Current are allowing more dangerous chances than they did last year, and they're not getting the saves that they had last year. So on every line, you're getting a little bit of a step back, and it's culminating in just a team that has 6 points through 6 matches, 2 wins at home, 4 losses on the road. Next week, they're away at North Carolina. Now, they have 4 home matches before the summer break where they play Boston, they play Houston, which that is looking a lot harder than it did at the start of the season. Portland, which again, it's a lot harder than you maybe expected. And then Chicago, who knows what happened to that match. And if you are Chris Armas sitting here thinking that you've been unlucky in these matches so far, you're probably expecting to win those 4 matches. And if you, at the very least, get 8 to 10 points from those 4 matches, now you're looking at a team that has gotten the majority of points at home. So what? You're bad on the road. That's still a formula for getting to the playoffs and maybe even getting to a home playoff match with how just stuck in the middle most NWSL teams have been. This league seems like anyone's league Maybe San Diego runs away with it. Like, who knows what we're at this point? Like, this could be anyone's league. So maybe you're looking at this and you're not as worried as these results lay out. But I think there are some really worrying signs here, and that is that the goal scoring really hasn't been there because Alex Tenure has not been the 9 that you're hoping she turns into. She is a 10, maybe a 9.5 if we're being generous. But if you're not getting goals from Alex Tenure, if you're not creating the transition opportunities for Tamachwinga to get on the end and to be the really transformative player that she can be, in this match, she looked somewhat pedestrian, and that is not something that you said much about Tamachwinga over the past 2 seasons. This is a player that, along with Barbara Banda, have been so far ahead of the other individual performances in this league, and if you're not getting transformative performances out of her, all of a sudden, like, you're losing a major weapon that has made you just such an important team over the past 2 seasons. And you saw in the playoffs last year that the KC Current, without Tamachwinga, against a Gotham that were at the height of their powers at that point, had trouble creating chances. If Michelle Cooper isn't also being transcended on the wing because Tamachwinga isn't taking some of that attention, if you don't have Bia or an equal striker, Kaylee Hopkins, I think, has been better than expected this year, but she is not going to be that player that transforms a match the way that Tamachwinga can, the way that Bia could. You're missing that. And because you're not creating these transition opportunities, because like Washington really locked them down tonight and they tried to really win the wide areas, and the Current just weren't good enough in the midfield to win that battle and take advantage. So you're looking at a team that really needs to figure out what it can be good at and really needs to figure out how to create away from Tamachwinga to then open up Tamachwinga, or to really maybe sit deeper and open up those transition opportunities for Chwinga to run onto, because they're not winning balls in really attacking areas like they have been previously. This is a team that the spacing is just not what it was. In the past, they were a compact block. The defensive line stepped up high, and as the forwards were really being aggressive and swarming the ball, it was a lot more coordinated, and there were not passing lanes to pass out of. And as you tried to go long, as the Current pressed, then a defender stepped up and won the ball at the halfway line, and now all of a sudden the Current have numbers coming at you. Now, those pressing triggers have not been as coordinated, and it's really easy to see in these away matches, especially, that there's one player pressing, and it's an easy outlet to get out of that. The pressing triggers have not been what they need to be, has not been as organized as it needs to be. And it's clear that, like, I don't want to pin this all on Chris Armas, but the manager is not doing the job that he needs to be doing, especially for someone who is coming in, running a very similar system. And that was kind of the whole selling point. Chris Armas was supposed to come in and just keep the ball rolling for what Vlatko and Donoski have done over the past 2 seasons. And it's clear that the lines are much deeper. This is much more expansive. You now all of a sudden have so much space in between the lines, and you don't have a Claire Hutton type that can step in and take away some of that pressure. You see on this 3rd goal tonight, there's a pass into Hal Hirschfeld to really kick this off, and Hal Hirschfeld is able to turn and has all the time in the world to thread this ball into Sofia Cantore, because she's in the middle of this 4-player KC Current box, and there are about 10 feet on either side of her to turn and have all the time in the world to send this pass in, and really a inch perfect pass into Cantore. And Cantore has to make a great move to find Lacey Santos in the middle, but it all kicks off because Hirschfeld has all the room in the world, because she's sitting in between the lines of the attacker and the midfielders that are kind of bunkered and trying to form that line at the edge of the box. It's not going well, all that to say. So maybe things change in North Carolina next week, but like, the Courage have been playing well. Maybe things change when they return home, but if you're looking at this shouldn't be a case where you have to wait and see, because this isn't a team that's rebuilding. This isn't like we see sometimes where a team is rebuilding, results don't look great, but you know that they're trying to set up a system, that they're trying to install something with players that maybe haven't done this before, or with players that maybe aren't up to the task. This is a team that, for the most part, bar a couple of players, bar your Haley Mace, Claire Hutton, Bia, like, this is a team that should be right where they were at the top of the league. That caliber of player, adding Croy Bethune to that as well. But now the balance is off. Now they're out of a playoff spot, 6 games in, with a game in hand, or a game over what teams have played because they're playing early. If things go against them, they could be looking at a table after Sunday where they're sitting in 13th place. There's 6 matches. That's not what you would have expected. And this is all because the current brass overreacted to a shock playoff loss where, sliding doors moments. If Temwa Schwinga isn't injured or if she's able to be back for that game against Gotham, if Rose Lavelle returns earlier than she does in the season last year and Gotham are able to tack on a couple more points before the last game of the year, then Gotham are an 8 seed, and then all of a sudden it's not Casey Curran without Temwa Schwinga against Gotham at the height of their powers, who are an 8 seed because they were so banged up at the start of the season that things just weren't clicking for them at all. Maybe there's something in that with how Gotham has started this year, but there's not that excuse that Gotham are actually healthy and they have found good players from the college ranks as well. That does not really factor into why they aren't scoring. So you're now left with a Casey Curran that, what's the solution here? Do you give Chris Armas more time to try to figure this out? What is there to figure out exactly? You have a team that has been, second best in most matches this season against Utah and Gotham. They get the win at home, but even those matches weren't necessarily as straightforward as you want them to be. Against Chicago, you could say that you maybe deserved another point out of that. Against the Reign, against Portland, and then now against DC, you've been run off the pitch. And in those matches specifically, you've lost by combined 9-0. Not good, especially if you consider yourself trying to be one of the best teams in the league. If you consider yourself as a team that will be a home playoff team at the end of the year, you can't be losing to 3 teams that are the Reign a playoff team? I don't know, but Portland for sure, the Spirit for sure. You're losing to those teams and you're not able to score a goal against them. You're not really creating much danger against them. You have a couple of chances here and there, but there are obvious flaws. DC talked about they knew that if they could go around the Current essentially. They wanted to win in the wide areas and they knew that they could really exploit them in those areas. And you see all night long, they're able to exploit the Current by building out wide and then channeling in centrally for the final move. They score 4 goals, and that is the story of the game. So I don't know where they go for here. If I were in charge of this team, I would probably move on from the manager at this point. But then who's calling the shot on finding the replacement? Do you give this until the summer break to really see that we have more time to work on it and more time to find a replacement if this doesn't work? Is this as simple as calling Lacko and Andonovsky again and telling them, all right, we made a mistake. If you could please return to the sideline, we would love it. And I don't know. The mix does not feel right. And maybe this is an overreaction after 6 games, but this is the worst 6-game stretch for the Current in the past 2 seasons. Even 3 seasons ago when they were, building and you had the Matt Potter firing, you had Caroline Schulbohm coming in. That was an interesting year, a rough year, but even then, I think it felt like you were building to something versus, and you had injuries to kind of point to, versus this year where, are you waiting for Vanessa DiBernardo to come back? Are you waiting for Bailey Feist to be healthy? It's rough. It's rough out there. So anyway, that's where the Current are. I just wanted to talk about it because seeing where this team were just 4 months ago to where they are now, the vibes could not be any different. And you look at Gotham, another team who are coming off a championship, who were thought to be the class of the league essentially. And maybe you excuse their goal scoring difficulties for a few matches, but coming in, they've only scored 2 goals coming into this match tomorrow. That's another team in crisis. And if it continues, I'll be back to talk about the crisis clubs. But for now, thank you all so much for coming to Talkin Soccer. Let me know what you think the Current need to do to really get out of this mess, get out of this funk, especially on the road where you can't just lose all your road games all year long. And let me know who you think is going to be the next crisis club. But shout out to Racing Louisville for getting the 3-2 win over Orlando this evening. That's a win that they've needed, and a game where they played fine, but they got some very good goals from Malay and goals that were maybe against the expectations. And you look at the expected goals, and it's a game that they probably would have expected a lot to lose, and that is not a good juxtaposition from earlier in the year when they were losing games they should have won. But you take it, and eventually these things even out, you hope. So that's where we are for now. Thank you all so much, folks, for watching. If you want to engage with my takes going forward, please subscribe to Talkin Soccer. I'll be back later this weekend to talk about some more NWSL news. I talked on the newsletter this week. Columbus have been granted expansion for $205 million, plus some other interesting and maybe problematic things about that bid. NWSL is also talking about a potential schedule change, and the players do not seem to be up for it. And I talked about that over on Talkin Soccer on the newsletter, and I will probably have a video about that later this weekend as well. So for now, folks, thank you all so much for watching. Have a great rest of your weekend. Have a great night, and we will talk real soon.